If you struggle with anger, more than just getting irritated when the barista is taking too long to make your coffee, or when someone cuts you off in traffic and you just want to shake your fist at them, I'm talking more here about sort of this underlying feeling of anger that you carry with you a lot of the time. Maybe it's directed towards a certain person, or maybe it's just something you kind of feel a lot of the time. You feel this tension, like you're this pot that's about to boil and you're trying so hard to keep the lid on, but you feel often like any moment you're going to explode and just sort of spray boiling hot water droplets on everyone around you. And maybe you often do. And then you feel ashamed of that. You feel upset that you feel emotionally out of control. And then it kind of compounds and you feel even worse, which brings up even more anger and more likely for you to have an angry outburst again because you are dealing with all this shame and guilt around how you've been treating people or acting or just showing up in your life, and it doesn't feel good. So I want to talk today about sort of some strategies to deal with this deeper anger. Like I said, more than just sort of getting irritated and frustrated by little everyday occurrences that can happen to any of us if we're feeling kind of overwhelmed or we're just feeling stressed, but sort of this deeper feeling that you're like, I've really been struggling with this and I really don't like it. We're going to talk today about that. If you're new here, welcome to our incredible little corner on the internet. Take a second, introduce yourself in the comment section below. If you're back again, it is always good to have you. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. The button's about right down there. And either way, my name is Julia Christina. I am a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, a coach, and the creator of my amazing membership community, the Shift Society, that so many of you here are now shifters and you're a part of. So it's good to have you. A little extra special shout out to my shifters here today. You can get more information about the Shift Society in the description below. I help heart-centered humans break through the crap that is holding them back so that they can like themselves and their lives more every day. And anger is one of those things that really can hold us back. Now, often in psychology, we talk about anger as a secondary emotion, as sort of a more surface emotion that is covering up a more vulnerable emotion. Now, anger can also be a primary emotion. You can feel kind of like righteous indignation for wrongdoing, for suffering, for injustice, and you can feel just like very angry about that in and of itself. But we're going to talk today more about anger as a secondary emotion. It's usually like an outward directed emotion, or it can be directed inwards. We can turn anger against ourselves, which is very common as well, but it's often covering up a more vulnerable emotion because it's often easier to feel angry than hurt. It's often easier to feel angry than scared. It's often easier to feel angry than disappointed or discouraged. It's often easier to feel angry than rejected. And so we do often struggle with anger. And just as an aside as well, it can be even harder for women to deal with anger because we've been socialized to believe that if we are ever demonstrating anger, then we are being a bitch. Right? Anger is often a more acceptable emotion for men, not always, but just I'm speaking in just sort of generalizations here. But women are often not allowed to feel angry, and so we often repress that anger, and we kind of struggle with it more. We often tend to turn it inwards more, and so then sort of create that more turmoil inside. And then if we do ever lash out in that anger, then we feel extra shame and guilt because we're like, I'm not supposed to be angry. I'm supposed to be like lovely, light, and pleasant and pleasing. So it can really kind of mess with our heads if you do struggle with anger, and there can be so many layers to it. So I want to just tell you right off the bat that anger is not a bad or wrong emotion. There's no such thing as a bad or wrong emotion. There's just human emotions. And if we stop labeling things as bad or wrong, then it takes the shame out of it and we can actually start to look at it and deal with it and work it out and move through it. So anger is just an emotion, like we talked about, kind of a secondary emotion that's there for a reason to protect us from something that might feel more vulnerable. That just might feel more tender. And so we're trying to kind of put up this front to protect ourselves from that. But it can be really frustrating to struggle with anger. It can be frustrating going through and feeling like you have a really short fuse and that you end up lashing out at people, because then you have to deal with the ramifications of that, both hurting the other person, potentially harming the relationship or hurting the relationship, and then also the guilt and shame that you feel afterwards because you feel, like we talked about, feeling that emotionally out of control. And so, like we said, anger can be used for good when it motivates us into positive action, but it can also be unhelpful when it is creating these cycles of like outburst, harm, and shame. So let's work on dealing with it, getting a little bit deeper with it. Instead of just, your typical kind of like breathing exercises and taking a break and collecting yourself, all super helpful. But we also want to look at it at a deeper level to start to resolve some of those underlying issues that are causing it in the first place. The first thing to do then is to get curious. I talk about that a lot on here, and someone in the Shift Society mentioned, man, Julia, a lot of the time when we have questions and when we're dealing with something, you often say the first thing to do is to get curious. And that is absolutely true. It's to just start to understand and look at what's really going on here so that we're not being self-critical, we're not avoiding, we're not repressing. We're just looking at and observing and saying, like, what is going on here? What is happening here? We start to just sort of explore and do a little experimenting with it and start to see what is happening. So get curious. When I am feeling angry, what is the underlying emotion? What am I really feeling right now? When I want to lash out at this person, when I want to scream and yell and stomp my feet or just like hide under a pile of coats and hope everything turns out okay, I just want to avoid it all. What's really going on here? What am I really feeling? Am I feeling hurt? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling scared? Am I feeling rejected? Am I feeling hopeless? What is going on here? It might take a little bit of effort to do that. It might take some journaling, some writing. Might take, processing with a therapist. We do this a lot in the Shift Society. People working, we have exercises that we do to get more clarity about what's really going on, what we're really thinking, what we're really feeling, what we're really believing, what's really happened and our experience of that. But digging a little bit deeper and getting curious about what's really going on here. And then asking yourself, where is this anger really from? So if I am yelling at my kids, is it really because my child didn't clean up after themselves? Or is it because I just had a conversation with my mom and she started kind of questioning and maybe even criticizing some of the choices that I'm making, which made me feel kind of controlled, maybe a little manipulated, maybe kind of insecure, uncomfortable. And I'm just like struggling with those feelings now. So I'm feeling kind of angry at her for, questioning me or criticizing me. So now I'm feeling like all of these feelings and I'm kind of bubbling up inside. And then I just looked over and saw a mess and I yelled at my child, right? I lost it. Or maybe my partner left his socks on the floor and I lost it on him or her or whatever that is, whoever that is. Where is this really from? Right? Is it something that happened at work that you're feeling vulnerable about? Maybe someone looked at you sideways in a meeting, or someone challenged you on something in front of other people and it just felt really wrong, or it just felt kind of contrarian and it made you feel insecure or whatever that is. And then you came home and, flipped out on your partner for sighing the wrong way. I don't know, whatever that is. And you know that when you're like, I don't know why these things are bothering me so much. Why was this stuff getting to me? What's really going on? Where is this anger really from? If you're feeling triggered, looking deeper and being like, what is this triggering right now? That person just looked at me sideways. Why did that bother me so much? What did I make that mean? Did I make it mean that they obviously think that I'm an idiot? And do I have a history of feeling belittled? Right? And so did I grow up in a family where I often felt like I was being belittled or criticized or judged for things? And maybe my mom would look at me sideways or my dad would look at me sideways. And then right soon after that, they would start criticizing me or calling me down. And so I would just sort of was on my guard when someone looks at me sideways, because I think that the criticisms are coming next. The judgments are coming next. So that is a trigger for me, and just sort of looking a little bit more deeply into that. Where is this really coming from? If my mom questions my decisions, why is that bothering me so much? Do I feel insecure and not trust myself to be able to make decisions for myself because maybe I had an overly controlling parent who doubted my decisions, didn't let me make decisions. And so now when someone questions it, I find it very triggering, right? Like, what is really going on here? And starting to look at, where is this really coming from? Again, we don't always have the exact clarity. We don't always know the specific circumstance, but if you can dig a little bit deeper and just start to look at, like we talked about in the first step, is to like identify what the emotion is, right? What that underlying emotion is, and why is this coming up for me? And when have I felt this way before? Or where is the history there? Is there a history there? Is there something bigger going on? And again, you may need to process this with a therapist. You may need to come into the Shift Society and help to, work to process it in there and use the tools in there and the support and the guidance in there to do this. But digging a little deeper. Another strategy that you can use is to journal. If you have a hard time going around in your head about it, write it out on paper. Why am I feeling angry? What happened? What led up to it? When they said that? When they did that? What came up for me? Why did that come up for me? What was really going on there? What felt triggered? What felt vulnerable? What felt unsafe? What was happening? And so writing it out, and I have another video on using writing, different skills, writing skills that we can use to process an emotion. Put the link to that in the description as well. But just getting that out on paper and getting that clarity, sometimes just going around and around in our head about it, we can get stuck in there and we don't have that clarity, but just getting it out on a piece of paper or on a computer screen, getting the words out can give you that little bit of outside perspective to be able to see it from that kind of third-party observation of just seeing the words and just getting it out of your head and then being able to see what is happening. Another thing you can do, if you are harboring deep-seated anger towards someone who hurt you, who wronged you, who betrayed you, who did something pretty horrible to you, and if you're hanging on to that anger, write a letter. Not necessarily a letter that you're going to send, but getting those thoughts and feelings out on paper, again, using that writing exercise to get that out. How are you feeling? How did you feel about it then when it happened? How are you feeling about it now? How has it impacted you? What would you say to them if you could see them? What do you want them to know? What's important for you in this moment? And again, not necessarily a letter that you're going to send. And I wouldn't recommend just sort of writing out all these things and then just like sending it off, because it can create more harm than good. But this is more of like, in this situation, I'm not saying that sending the letter is always bad. It's just something you might want to work with someone about and kind of doing that. And because there's a lot of nuances and stuff that can go on with letter writing. And there's a lot of things that if we're not doing it, if we're not kind of setting our intentions properly, if we're not doing it kind of in the right way, it can create more harm than good for us, and for our relationships. So just writing it for yourself to get that clarity, to acknowledge that hurt and that pain, that disappointment, to acknowledge that within yourself, to be able to hold space for that, to be able to like, this is how it impacted me. This is how it impacted me then. This is how it's impacting me now. This is my experience of it. I don't want to stay stuck in it. I want to get through it and I want to understand it, but I have to acknowledge it and honor it a lot of the time in order to do that and just get clarity on it before I can start to work through it and release it. So writing that letter. Another thing to do when you notice those feelings come up is to work on self-regulating. So being able to find the ground underneath your feet, being able to catch it, because again, like I talked about at the beginning, when we struggle with anger and we're not really coping with it very well, and then we end up kind of letting it build up and then we lash out, and then we often feel shame or guilt afterwards, and we can kind of it can have a negative impact on our relationships. And then we have like fear around that as well, to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. What if this person, gets eventually fed up with me? What if it creates a rift in the relationship? What if things are never the same? And then we say like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I control this? I'm so out of control. I'm so awful. I'm such a terrible person. And then we create all this shame, which then gets sort of stuck inside of us, right? And so then it fills up a bunch of our emotional space inside when we're struggling with so much shame, so that we get filled up with other emotions. When other things in life are coming up, we get kind of filled up a lot more easily, and then we get overwhelmed a lot more easily and end up lashing out a lot more easily, and the cycle continues. So if you can start to notice it and catch it before you release it in a not helpful way, then it's going to help to break that cycle as well. So being able to just say, I'm feeling really angry right now, or I'm feeling vulnerable right now, or I'm feeling frustrated right now, instead of lashing out and being like, how could you do this? What's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't care about me. You don't care about anyone other than yourself. You're horrible. Whatever that is that we do when we're angry. The things that we regret, just be able to say, I'm feeling really angry right now, feeling really upset right now, feeling like this isn't fair right now. Right? I don't like this. Something needs to be different. We need to figure this out, right? Just being able to say how you're feeling, say it, don't spray it. Or being able to take a breath, take a break, take a bath, go for a walk, remove yourself from the situation when you notice yourself getting filled up, instead of just trying to stay and tough it out. Because when we stay and tough it out, then often makes things tougher. So being able to just like give yourself some space, notice when you're starting to feel overwhelmed, when you're starting to notice that fuse getting shorter, when you notice yourself getting fuller and fuller of emotion, and it's about to come out in not helpful ways, taking some space from it, collecting yourself, breaking that sort of lashing out shame cycle. Anger can run deep. It can come about if you had a parent or a caregiver who lashed out a lot in anger. It can become a habit. That's how you learn to deal with your emotions, because that's what you observed, what was modeled to you. It can come about because you've been through some really hard things that you're carrying around with you that you haven't worked through or resolved or dealt with, looked at, processed. It's not always an easy one. There's not always a quick fix. But using some of these tools to help you get started on that, and then coming and joining us in the Shift Society so we can do this deeper work on anger. And also learning how to not get so caught up when we are feeling angry, learning how to notice the signs, learning how to create that space. I have a free 10-minute guided mindfulness exercise that's going to help you do that. And you can do this exercise as a preventative measure to just learn every day, just sort of take in these words and regulate yourself and get the ground underneath your feet before you even start your day. Start the day in a more calm state, and then you're going to have more space to be able to cope with whatever it is that's going on. Or when you notice yourself starting to get activated, take a break, put your headphones in, listen to this 10-minute guided mindfulness exercise, and get yourself grounded in that moment so that you can move forward and through whatever it is that's coming up for you. You can move through it in a more healthy, helpful, productive, and serving way. So grab the 10-minute guided mindfulness exercise, get on the wait list for the Shift Society. If you liked the video, if you could hit the like button, that would be amazing. Help getting these tools in front of more people so that more people can start working through their anger as well. And let me know, what's one of your biggest takeaways? Would love to hear in the comment section. As always, amazing to have you here. And until next time, take good care.